Mr. Speaker, I'm privileged to be the proud owner of a copy of the former Prime Minister's new book. It's a rare, unsigned copy.
He ought to spend a bit less time reading that book and a bit more time reading the Deputy Leader's tax advice.
Everyone knows it's the Tory party's obsession with wild, unfunded tax cuts that crashed the economy.
He tried to make his predecessor Prime Minister. Despite him opposing NATO and Trident, ignoring antisemitism.
We now come to Prime Minister's questions. Sir Len Saxby.
Question 1, please, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are joined today in the gallery by postmasters caught up in the Horizon IT scandal. It is one of the greatest miscarriages of justice in our history, and that is why we've introduced a bill to quash convictions, delivered schemes to ensure swift compensation, and established an independent inquiry. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Sir Len Saxby.
Mr. Speaker, does my right honourable friend agree towns like Barnstaple, the main transport hub in North Devon serving hundreds of square miles, should have a fully functioning bus station, as Lib Dem run North Devon Council has not reopened now since the pandemic, leaving residents out in the cold with no public facilities? As people start to feel the difference with tax cuts and falling inflation, does he agree we should be making it easier for people to use the bus, come to town and support Barnstable's local economy? And will my right honourable friend join me in calling on the Lib Dems to get on with reopening the bus station?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we know how vital bus services are for communities right across the country. That's why we're providing Devon with £17 million to deliver better bus services, and we introduced the £2 fare bus cap. But I know my honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Transport, was recently visiting my honourable friend, seeing the benefits of reopening Barnstable bus station, and it's clear that the local Liberal Democrats should just get on and do it.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Can I too welcome the postmasters in the gallery in their quest for justice? And Mr. Speaker, this week we marked 35 years since the disaster at Hillsborough, and the enduring courage and determination of the families must be marked by the passing of a Hillsborough law. Mr. Speaker, we also lost Lord Richard Rosser, a lifelong member of the Labour Party. He will be greatly missed, and our thoughts are with his wife Sheena, his family and friends. Mr. Speaker, I'm privileged to be the proud owner of a copy of the former Prime Minister's new book. It's a rare, unsigned copy. It's the only unsigned copy. It's quite the read. She claims the Tory party's disastrous kamikaze budget that triggered chaos for millions was, her words, the happiest moment of her premiership. Has the Prime Minister met anyone with a mortgage who agrees?
Well, Mr. Speaker, all I'd say is he ought to spend a bit less time reading that book and a bit more time reading the Deputy Leader's tax advice.
I think we'll have less talking. I want to get through PMQs. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, we've got a billionaire Prime Minister and a billionaire Prime Minister, both of whose families have used schemes to avoid millions of pounds of tax, smearing a working-class woman. And the Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister, has a long list of people to blame for the economic misery. They don't want to hear it. They made her Prime Minister, and millions of people are paying the price. She's got a long list of people to blame. She blames the Governor of the Bank of England, the Treasury, the Office for Budget Responsibility. The American President is blamed at one point. We even learned that the poor old lettuce was part of the deep state. does the Prime Minister agree with me that it's actually much simpler than that? It was the Tories' unfunded tax cuts, tens of billions of pounds of unfunded tax cut, that crashed the economy and left millions paying more on their mortgages, wasn't it?
Mr. Speaker, everyone knows that 2 years ago I wasn't afraid to repeatedly warn about what her economic policies would lead to, even if it wasn't what people wanted to hear at the time. Mr. Speaker, I was right then, but I'm also right now when I say that his economic policies would be a disaster for Britain. He would send inflation up, mortgages up and taxes up, and working people would pay the price.
Well, I appreciate the Prime Minister having the stomach to say it out loud, but everyone knows it's the Tory party's obsession with wild, unfunded tax cut that crashed the economy. We know it, he knows it, they know it, and the whole country is living it. So when is he finally going to learn the lesson from his predecessor's mistakes and explain where the money is coming from for his own completely unfunded £46 billion promise to scrap national insurance?
Mr. Speaker, when my predecessor was running for leader, to use his words, I did have the stomach to argue out loud about her economic policies, had the conviction to say that they were wrong. But not once, but twice, he tried to make his predecessor Prime Minister. Despite him opposing NATO and Trident, ignoring antisemitism and siding with our enemies. It's clear what he did. He put his own interests ahead of Britain's.
I think actually when he was running for Prime Minister, for leader, he was explaining how he's funneling money from poor areas to pay it into richer areas. We know what his record is. I notice he's not denying the £46 billion promise to scrap the national insurance, but is refusing to say where the money will come from. And we've been trying for months to get to the bottom of this. So now's his chance. No more spin, no more waffle, no more diversion. I know that'll be difficult. He can either, Mr. Speaker, this is the choice, he can either cut state pension or the NHS that national insurance funds, that's route one, or he can put up income tax. Which one is it?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've just cut taxes by £900 for a typical worker. We've delivered the biggest tax cut for businesses since the 1980s. But while we're cutting taxes, Labour is already putting them up. In Wales, putting up taxes right now for small businesses. In Birmingham, putting up council tax by 21%. And in London, his mayor has put up taxes by 70%, Mr. Speaker. And this is just a glimpse of what they'd do if they got in power. A few weeks ago, he finally admitted it to The Sun. What would he say he would do? I quote, he said, "We would put up taxes." It's always the same, Mr. Speaker. Higher taxes and working people paying the price.
No single politician has ever put tax up more times than he has. But Mr. Speaker, just hang on, because he was given the chance. He was just given the chance to rule out cutting the NHS or state pensions to pay for scrapping this. No, he's. I was a lawyer long enough to know when someone's avoiding the question. So I'm going to give him another chance. Will he now rule out cuts the NHS, cuts the state pension, or putting up taxes to pay for his unfunded £46 billion promise to scrap national insurance? Which is it?
Mr. Speaker, I make absolutely no apology about wanting to end the unfairness of the double taxation on work, Mr. Speaker. The NHS is receiving record funding under this Conservative government. Pensioners have just received a £900 increase under this government. But if he wants to talk about tax, let's have a look at what Labour's brand newly appointed tax advisor has to say. This advisor thinks that supporting pensioners is a complete disgrace, Mr. Speaker. He believes their free TV licences are ridiculous. And if it wasn't bad enough, this advisor has called for increases in income tax, in national insurance and VAT. Yeah, it all makes sense now. That's who the Shadow Chancellor's been copying and pasting from.
So this is genuinely extraordinary. Two chances to rule out, Mr. Speaker, two chances to rule out cuts to state pension, cuts to the NHS, or income tax rises to fund his promise to abolish national insurance.
Order. Mr. Hull, I want you to set a good example, not a bad one. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, this really matters. He's had two chances to rule out these cuts to NHS, cuts to tax or pensions or tax rises. This matters to millions of people watching who want to know what's going to happen to their NHS and pensions. It really does matter to millions of people who are watching. So I'll be really generous now and give him one last chance. Very simple, very clear. Is his £46 billion promise to abolish national insurance being paid for by cuts to the NHS, cuts to the state pension, or yet another Tory tax rise?
Mr. Speaker, he's really got to keep up, Mr. Speaker, right? It's this government that's just delivered a £900 increase to the state pension. It's this government that's already committed to the triple lock for the next Parliament. He had 6 opportunities. I didn't think I heard him say that, Mr. Speaker. And when it comes to the NHS, you'd much rather be treated in Conservative-run NHS in England, not the Labour-run NHS in Wales, Mr. Speaker. But it's another week where all we heard is political sniping, Mr. Speaker, not a word about their plans for the country. He's failed to acknowledge that since we last met, taxes have been cut by £900, state pensions gone up, free childcare has been expanded, wages have risen for 9 months in a row, Mr. Speaker, and just today, inflation down again to 3.2%. Our plan is working and the Conservatives are delivering a brighter future for Britain.